All right, we'll start out today with our thought for today. Really like this one. The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. The realist adjusts the sails. So we want to move now to, looks like we have a really small group today, maybe Midsummer Blues. So it doesn't look like we have any visiting Rotarians yet. If we do, we'll certainly recognize them or any guests. So I want to move right to the members share section. So if Lisa, this should be pretty quick, but we want to move to today's question, which she will pose.
Right. Well, since we're talking politics during our main presentation, I thought it might be fun to look back at the very first presidential election that you remember voting in. So I will start and say it was 1984. I was a freshman in college, and it was Reagan against Mondale. That was 1984. So we'll look at Oscar and then Joe and then Dr. Jeff Cabot in order, and we'll go around the Zoom room. So Oscar, what was your first presidential election?
Yeah, mine wasn't too long ago. It was 2016. Am I echoing?
You are. But if anybody knows how to fix that, it's Oscar. There you go.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Mine was 2016, and I believe it was Donald Trump. Why am I acting like I forgot? It was Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll go around the room. Joe Battori and then Jeff. Joe.
John F. Kennedy, 1964.
Okay. Is Joan right there? Does she want to chime in, or we'll get to her on a different device?
No, I'm here. I was not able to vote yet, but I was campaigning for Lyndon Johnson door to door when he was running against, I think was it Barry Goldwater? Or was that Lyndon Johnson, or was that, not sure what that was, but I remember going door to door in Chester County, my first foray into politics.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Jeff, please, what was your first presidential election? You don't have to mention who you voted for, but just wanting to know what the race was at that time.
It was probably 80 or 84 like you were talking about, but I remember the 84 one because Reagan was the one who made our student loans non-deductible, which really upset me.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. We will move on to Jason Jones and then Karen and then Chris Coffer. Jason, hey there.
Hello, yes. It was 1992, Clinton versus Bush.
Okay, thank you. Karen, first presidential election you recall voting in?
I have no idea.
We can get back to you.
Remember to save my life.
All right, was Chris Coffer? Or, perhaps, where were you in?
Well, my first election was after I got American citizen, which is about 10 years ago. So I've only voted in the United States here, but I voted with my wife before.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Rosanna, and then Chris Rabb, welcome. And if you'd like to chime in and answer this question in advance of your presentation, you're welcome. Otherwise, we'll keep it to members only. But Rosanna, you're next.
It was Ronald Reagan, so a while ago.
Okay. All right. Chris Rabb, would you like to chime in? First presidential election you remember voting in?
1988.
And what was the race in 88?
Bill Clinton versus George Bush.
Okay. Thank you. And that looks like we've been through all the members that I can see. So thank you. We'll wrap up this getting to know each other. Oh, Dan King, we haven't heard from you, Dan King, or Jay, and I'm sorry, and Akira.
So 1968, when you still had to be 21 to vote. And it was a race between Richard Nixon and Hubert Humphrey and George Wallace, who was running on the American Independent Party ticket.
Oh, right.
And Nixon won, of course.
Thank you, Dan. Jay Penny?
Mine was 1980, Ronald Reagan, and I'm trying to remember now. It's been so long ago.
I'll confess, I looked it up on Google last night, knowing that we were going to ask this question. So yeah, it's some of these facts we just don't remember. Akira, were you voting, or were you in Japan, or what? We're talking about American presidential races. All right, well, he's muted. I think okay, Jay, you want to take it over?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, we can hear you now, Akira.
Okay, great. Eisenhower.
Eisenhower, okay.
Yeah. And
what year was that?
Catchphrase was, I like Ike.
I like Ike. I remember the Happy Day.
Eisenhower won the race. He won the race.
Okay.
He became a president after that.
Thank you, Akira.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Akira. All right, back to you, President Jay.
Okay, great. So I know we have some committee announcements. If we could start with fundraising. I know we have a bingo night on tomorrow evening. So Kelly couldn't make it today. So Oscar.
Sure, thank you. So today is the last day officially to register for the bingo night.
Oh, Jay.
For anybody that wants to or that has friends, I will put the link in the chat. We're really excited for the event, and I will be sending everybody their cards later this afternoon. It's going to be real simple. You're going to get an email from Eventbrite. It's going to have some reminders, and then you will have a link to click, and that will take you right to your cards to print out. Just a reminder that we will be reusing the cards. So make sure that you have something, whether it be scraps of paper or coins or whatever, to mark your card with. That's it for me.
Always. Oscar, I have a question on that. Do we need to log into an actual Eventbrite account, or can we get access to the cards without logging into Eventbrite?
You do not need to log in.
Okay, thanks. How many people do we have signed up?
Give me 1 second.
27, I think.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that's right.
So we're around $1,000, I think.
Yeah, just about. We have just about 940 raised.
Okay.
Well, that's great. But we have room for more. Don't we have space for about 50? So we could do a last minute push among our friends and family if we want to get more people to sign up.
Yes, we could.
All right.
That would be great. And to remind everyone, this money's going to be additional money will be put towards this $500 from the district, in addition to what we raise. And this is for a food bank in Kensington. 100% of the proceeds will go to the food bank. Nothing's going to our club. Yes, if we could do a last minute push, that would be great today. Reach out to your friends, relatives.
And I'll remind you that people are looking for interesting things to do on a Friday night. We're all kind of sick of being home, so this is something a little bit different, so you could plug it in that way. I was surprised. I got several people to sign up, and it's going to be nice. So yeah, the more the merrier. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, and because Oscar won't say it, I know he and Kelly and others have done a lot of planning for this. So I know a lot's gone into it, so please support it, and it's for a great cause. Next, service committee, we have an event actually Saturday morning. I don't think Patricia's on the call, is she? No. So I will mention we are going to work with the Southwest Philadelphia Rotary Club. They did a food drive also, and they are actually purchasing food and distributing it in Southwest Philadelphia. So they can use help packing the food as well as distributing it. And this was sent around on the email. Joan, is there anything I should add to that, or you would like to add?
No, I think as long as I have access to the registration list, I can put the registrants in direct contact with President Jonathan from the Southwest Philadelphia Club. And any questions you have, you can direct to him.
Okay, great. I know I plan to attend. They are very concerned about safety, so they're doing, I think, a good job in making sure that everyone, all the volunteers are safe. So masks and gloves are required for this. So hopefully some other folks will join us. I know some of the happy hour people are joining, right? Yep, great. All right, thank you. Any other announcements? Rosanna, do you want to comment on the membership strategic plan at all? You have to unmute.
There we go. Can you hear me now? Is this okay?
Yes.
Okay. We have had a few meetings about strategic planning for the club, and you will be getting an email maybe once a week for the a couple of weeks following this meeting, once a week in our newsletter. It basically, we're trying to see if we can bring in more prospective members, and also for us to have, you know, a variety of events and maybe a lot of different new things coming up for the club. One of them is the first email that you probably will be getting will be about maybe if you can share with us other clubs that you might belong to. Clubs to help out the community, civic organizations, church, schools, anything that you want to share with us that maybe in the future we can connect with these clubs and maybe share in their activities. You know, they can bring, they can invite us to their activities. We can bring them to ours. When we do some service activities, also invite in, the more the merrier. So you know, when you get it, please, if you do share with us, you know, any other clubs that you belong to, and let's see if we can work this out. That will be the first email that you probably will be getting sometime next week.
Great. Thank you, Rosanna. One note I have also, in addition to the other club announcements, our treasurer, Dave Gill, he had some surgery on his ankle. So if people want to reach out and wish him well, I know he's in recovery right now of that, and you know, he's recovering at home, but you may want to send him a note. One final announcement is we have a lot of memorabilia from our club, given that we're more than 100 years old. We're the 19th club, Rotary club in the world, that was at former president, past president Matt Tay's office, which we are going to gather because he is moving. His office is moving. So Jeff Cabot has graciously agreed to take temporarily this memorabilia of the club. I'm going to meet him next Wednesday to pick the items up. So it'll be an opportunity for me to look at this material, to see what we have, and perhaps look at a longer term solution and use of the material. So if anyone has any ideas later, let me know, and I'd be happy to talk about it in a future meeting. But we're going to do that on Wednesday.
Okay, Jay, excuse the interruption, but I just checked an email. Somebody's trying to get into our Zoom. The man from St. Petersburg sent an email, so I've sent him the Zoom link, so you might just check the waiting room to see if he's there.
There's no waiting room, so he'll be able to come in.
Oh, he will? Okay, sorry about that. Okay.
Great. No, thank you for, and we'll acknowledge him when he joins, let me know.
Sounds good.
Great. Are there any other announcements? Lisa, do you have any for public image or anything? No?
I do not, other than
Okay.
we've been stepping up our social media presence, and now all the meeting recordings from our Zooms are going up on YouTube in their full length. But the plan is to, when time allows, I'll do some basic editing of our presentations from our speakers, and then we can post on Facebook some little highlights of the presentation. So that's just a way to kind of keep our Facebook presence a little more active with more content that might engage viewers and prospective members. So working on that.
Yeah. And we're also experimenting with some member interviews, self-interview.
Yes, definitely. Oscar actually set a nice example, which you can find on our YouTube page, of a member testimonial. Basically, we'd love for all of us to create a little selfie video on a tripod. I should have said on a tripod, so it's not shaky video. But yeah, we'd like to be able to post on social media something else like, hi, I'm Lisa. One of the reasons I love the Rotary Club of Philadelphia is blah, blah, blah. A little personal story to try to get people to give us a try. So we'll send out more details on that when we're ready to get organized. But Oscar did just set a kind of an example video, which you can have a look at and start thinking about the message that you might want to share.
Yeah, maybe we show that next week or something. We reached out to the organizations that we funded recently through our foundation to see if they would do a 1 or 2 minute clip thank you with some other information, and we would also share that. We're starting to get some good responses on that, so that'll provide some other content. Thank you, Lisa. Any other club announcements? Okay, so we'll move right to our speaker today, which I'm really happy to have here. And he has a very extensive CV and background. So I'll just cover a little bit and
yeah, please don't read the whole thing.
Okay. All right.
Not necessary.
I'll do the shortest version, which I always like this. But we're very happy to have Honorable Christopher Rabb here today. He's the Pennsylvania State Representative, and he's going to talk about the state of the Democratic Party. But his 1 second elevator speech, he described himself as a father, educator, author, and social justice activist. And he has a book out too. It's a few years back, but it seems very interesting to me. I want to get a copy of it. It's called Invisible Capital: How Unforeseen Forces Shape Entrepreneurial Opportunities. So I'd really like to read that. And also he is a graduate of Yale College and the University of Pennsylvania. And he lives in Mount Airy, which is nearby, I know. And so without further ado, if we could welcome Christopher Rabb.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on the Zoom call with all of you. This is only my second Rotary Club gig. I did one for Chestnut Hill, for those of you who are in Chestnut Hill. I did that live in person well before the pandemic. I believe it was last year sometime, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. So any opportunity to get in front of Rotarians, happy to do it. My friends call me Rep Rabb. And the reason I emphasize that is, if you call me Rep Rabb, I know that we have met. If you call me Chris Robb, or if you call me Senator Rabb or something, I know that we haven't met. So please, it's a term of affection among my 65,000 constituents in Northwest Philadelphia. I was elected in 2016, and I serve on a number of committees, including Judiciary, Agriculture, Finance, and Commerce. And I'm also a founding member of the Climate Caucus, and a recent addition to the board of the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators. Today, I actually wanted to talk to you about something different than party politics, and it's important that I tell you why. So I'm engaging you all on a government phone, which means that ethically, I'm not allowed to talk about politics, partisanship, endorsements, candidates, campaigns, re-election. None of those things I'm allowed to. And you all should support that, because we need to have a strong firewall between policy and politics. a lot of the reason people get in trouble is they use their influence as incumbents, as elected officials, as public servants, for their own personal gain, or for the benefit of a particular party. So I'm speaking to you today as in a nonpartisan fashion, as an elected member of the Pennsylvania General Assembly. So I can talk about how different members and different caucuses in the General Assembly have different views that align around party affiliation. That's fine. But this pop-up civics moment that I'm doing right now is really important because every state is different. And for those of you who have lived, worked, studied in different states, you're not supposed to know the ins and outs of the Pennsylvania legislative process and the do's and don'ts. So I pretty much tell everyone this because it's really good and important information. I will not be talking about my reelection or why one party is better than the other or any of that. And I really don't have much interest in having those kinds of conversations. I'm a nerd. I wear that badge proudly. And I believe in public service, which is why I ran for office in the beginning. And some of the things I'm proudest of could not have happened without strong bipartisan support. I recently had a bill that had languished for 18 months in the Judiciary Committee that was signed into law 2 weeks ago, and it was unanimously supported in both the Judiciary Committee and in the House and the Senate. Unanimous. That's very rare unless you're naming a bridge. So the fact that I could get a bill that a year and a half ago was somewhat controversial, and after all of these protests and public support for change around police accountability sailed through both chambers is really a testament to our participatory democracy and those of us who believe deeply in expressing our First Amendment rights to assemble, to speak, to express ourselves however we see fit in a nonviolent way. So that bill is one of the things I think you will find very interesting, particularly if you read in the Inquirer that there's a police officer who will be charged for pepper spraying an unarmed protester in the face, and there's a picture of him doing it, and perhaps video as well. He will be charged. My bill creates a police misconduct database. It's and we will be one of the few states in the country that will have such a database so that chiefs of police and municipalities like Philadelphia or a small borough or town can actually get a sense of who they are potentially hiring before they extend a job offer. They can look in their personnel files to see if they see any egregious pattern of misconduct, which is what any employer would want, frankly. Right now, a police chief can look at their resume, can check their references, and can call the previous law enforcement agency where they worked and said, did this person work there and in what capacity and for how long? That police agency is not allowed to say, oh yeah, Officer Rabb was great or Officer Rabb was awful, because they could be sued. So most law enforcement agencies that seek to hire good folks are flying blind. Now with this database that will be created within a matter of months will allow the level of transparency and accountability all institutions should have, certainly ones that employ people with firearms and badges. I know a lot about transparency and accountability as an elected official. Anybody in the world who wants to know where my home address is can find it, my date of birth, how much money I've received, where I've spent my money, every single legislative activity, every single vote, it's all there, quickly, freely, without any conditions. I like that level of transparency and accountability. I think it's important for elected officials to have, and even appointed officials for that matter, to think that there should be a much lower standard for people who carry lethal weapons and badges is absurd to me, which is why I'm so proud that this legislation I authored some time ago is now state law. And what that will allow us to do in the case of this person who flagrantly abused this woman who was exercising her First Amendment rights, his charge will go into his personnel file. And if he leaves or gets fired, and let's say the charges are dropped or he's acquitted, which is normally the case for law enforcement officers who are charged. And he wants to leave and get another job in law enforcement anywhere in the state or anywhere in the country. The prospective law enforcement employer can tap into the database and look at his record and decide if this guy's worth hiring. And if they see a red flag, they're required to submit a hiring report that's available to the public through right to know requests. And that hiring report will have to lay out why they hired a person who pepper sprayed somebody in the face, or whatever egregious acts he committed before or after that point. And so that's a level of transparency and accountability I think all public servants should have, whether they're elected or they carry a gun. So the God is in the details, as they say. So this database and this new law will only be as powerful as the regulations that oversee the implementation of this new statute. So that is the next step that I'm working on. And I'm also seeking to work closely with municipalities who can put into force ordinances that provide even greater transparency and accountability, so that we all are comfortable knowing that whomever is hired in the law enforcement community does not have a pattern of egregious misconduct. So all of that is laid out in the law in terms of what is considered egregious misconduct. It's not surprising to you, I'm sure, that it includes excessive force, discrimination, sexual abuse, theft, falsifying reports, judicial finding of dishonesty, and a few others, and any criminal convictions associated with any of those things. So one of the reasons this is bipartisan is because it's really hard to say, no, we don't need transparency and accountability when it comes to people who serve in this capacity. And also it was supported by some very unlikely stakeholders, including the Fraternal Order of Police, which is not exactly the stalwart of transparency or accountability, but they needed to get behind something and prove that they're actually for some kind of reform. We're talking about an institution that's 320 years old. When we talk about policing in Pennsylvania, the first antecedent of the modern police force was established in 1700. It was called the Night Watch. It was kind of like what we have now. We have town watches, blocks, with folks with vests and walkie-talkies and such. That was really the first antecedent to policing in Pennsylvania. And then 133 years later, they had the Day Watch, where they conscripted young, poor white men to surveil communities on a part-time basis. And I say conscript because these were folks who didn't want to do that job, but they had very little political or social power to say no. And then in 1855, the Philadelphia police force was formalized, so it became a full-time professional entity. So it was one of the first police forces in the country. And then since that time, it has evolved incrementally, but it has never had a lot of transparency or accountability associated with it. And as a result, the phenomenon of police violence has been the norm and not the exception. And it took a number of very visible and independently documented killings to make this a national priority, which it should have been generations ago. The signs you see at recent protests were not unlike those from 60 years ago during the Civil Rights Movement that talked explicitly about police brutality. So I'm really excited that Pennsylvania is now on the forefront in terms of these issues around reforming police conduct and making us feel more comfortable that policing can be more closely tethered to community safety. I'm happy to take questions. I can talk about other things more broadly beyond this bill. I really like to use these platforms to have you engage me as it relates to anything on the legislative front on the state level, because the state legislature is rarely spoken about. We talk about what happens at City Hall, we talk about what happens in the White House or perhaps Congress, and we forget that some of the most meaningful things occur in Harrisburg, despite our lack of familiarity and knowledge about the process on the state level. So if you care about equal rights, wages, environment, education, housing, so on, you're more likely going to be influenced in your day-to-day life based on what comes out of Harrisburg than Washington, D.C. It's a blind spot for a lot of folks, even folks who vote every election. I have folks who think I'm a congressperson who've been voting for me now for a number of years and don't realize, no, I'm not in DC, I'm in Harrisburg. And I think it's particularly important because there's a lot of change that can happen and happen more quickly on the state level than what's happening in Washington, DC. So I'm happy to take any questions specifically or generally.
Hi, Rabb. Dr. Jeff Cabot, dentist in Queen Village, Rotary member for over 20 years now. I'm very concerned about this Portland thing and that Philadelphia has been mentioned that they might want to send troops here. Is there discussions about this in Harrisburg?
Well, we are in recess, so there's no discussions in Harrisburg, but there are discussions amongst like-minded folks. So I share your deep concern because I've been flooded with emails, more emails in the past 2 weeks than in the past 4 years around a resolution that would remove the power of Governor Wolf to impose declarations, emergency declarations. And a lot of the concern is cloaked in freedoms and masks and emergency declarations being, limiting our freedoms and our liberty. And this is the birthplace of freedom and so forth. And how what the governor's doing is tyrannical. Tyranny has been one of those key words in the thousands of emails we've been getting. And we believe that a lot of those emails have been created by bots. So it's not actually real people, but they changed the language to make it look like real people. And there's never been a more concerted effort of anything I've seen in office than that. And the irony is the people who support the resolution to remove the power of the governor, constitutional power, are silent about what the federal administration is doing in Portland, Oregon. So I find it ironic that it's tyrannical to mandate masks, which are one of the few epidemiologically sound things to reduce the coronavirus, the spread. That's somehow tyranny, but sending unmarked vehicles with government lethally equipped federal agents of one agency or another, because they're not disclosed, literally dragging people off of the streets and into custody, or just being detained and not actually in custody, is nothing short of fascist. And, I've lived in other countries. So I don't say this as a Democrat. I don't say this as a Philadelphian. I say this as someone who takes democracy very seriously. And the fact that there's so much silence from the very same people who are saying that epidemiology is a form of tyranny is mind-boggling. And one of the reasons I like to speak as a public servant and not as a partisan is because at what point do we say country first? When do we say we are patriots, we are citizens, we are residents of a great commonwealth, we have to work together irrespective of our political ideologies or our party affiliations? And this is one of those moments. There's no true conservative, no true progressive who believes it's appropriate for federal agents to detain people, not arrest them, just detain them for expressing their First Amendment rights. It is mind-boggling to me. And I'm actually working on a resolution today, I hope it will be circulated today, urging Governor Wolf and other members of the and members of the legislature to denounce and deny the federal administration from deploying troops for these nefarious purposes. It'd be one thing if the governor or the mayor said, "We need your help, please come." And there was some discussion, some data to suggest why this specific group of federal agents should come in and crack down with military-grade weapons. I don't believe the mayor of Portland asked for that. I don't believe the governor of Oregon asked for that. If anyone knows what's happening on the ground, it should be those local and state elected officials. And I guess the last point I'll make is, for all the people who say, you know, we got to watch the federal government and its encroachment and big government and big brother, and it's really about local control and local sovereignty, all of those people are silent now. Where are those people saying it is not appropriate for the feds to come down when the mayor and the governor are saying, we got this? And until they say otherwise, we should not be living in fear that federal agents are coming in. And I should mention too, I represent Chestnut Hill, Mount Airy, and a piece of West Oak Lane, 65,000 folks. Relatively speaking, I represent one of the lowest violent crime areas in the city. And yet, some nameless elected official asked the governor and or mayor to send in the National Guard. So we had 8 men in camouflage and AR-15s walking up and down a quiet business corridor just a mile from my house for no good reason. This is not how we should live. And I am deeply, deeply concerned about the lack of leadership and a public outcry by members of Congress and on the state level around this egregious decision by the president. I'm deeply, deeply concerned. And I think it goes back to the point that we can't abdicate our rights to speak up and use our First Amendment rights as broadly and substantively as possible. So I share your concern, and I hope more people will speak out, because we must. Otherwise, we're complicit.
Question here. District Attorney Larry Krasner claims he has the authority to arrest these unsolicited federal agents. The president and the Department of Homeland Security in their public statements have said that local authorities like the district attorney do not have that authority. Has there been any discussion, or do you have any understanding about where the truth lies in that statement?
I imagine the courts will decide that. But if things happen before it gets to the courts, I'm curious how local and state law enforcement will logistically and operationally do what District Attorney Krasner suggests they can do. That also goes for the state troopers. The state troopers would be the folks who I would think would be the first line of defense for an occupying force that doesn't have jurisdiction. I don't know what the precedent is, and I'm not an attorney, so I don't know, but I do know that if there were a counter deployment of local and or state law enforcement officers in anticipation of federal deployment, or they showed up after the feds showed up, I'm so concerned about escalation. I'm also concerned that if there are good legal grounds for local and state to have precedent, that they abdicate their responsibility in protecting and serving the people of Pennsylvania and do what they want to do based on politics and not on their sworn oath. So I'll give you an example. During the unrest after the killing of George Floyd, there were some vigilantes in Fishtown, and they wielded axes and golf clubs and baseball bats, and they threatened people expressing their First Amendment rights in our city, not far from the Liberty Bell. And there was nothing happened to them. In fact, they were, some local police were joking around with them or even protecting them or giving them affirmation of what they were doing there. And that was deeply disturbing. It was an all-white vigilante group, and all the police officers who were there seemingly affirming their choices to come out with all kinds of weapons and incendiary talk, they were all white too. I'm concerned that there are elements in law enforcement, and there was a white supremacist group that hung out at the Fraternal Order of Police on the same day that Mike Pence showed up to visit Philadelphia. And without any kind of meaningful statement saying we oppose white supremacy or racism or hate or bigotry or violence, they just let it happen. And so part of my concern is if local and/or state law enforcement sits this one out, even if they're given a direct order to protect and defend the Commonwealth against an occupying force, that they'll say, no, we're going to go with these guys because they're fellow law enforcement and we don't care that they're trampling over our constitutional rights. And that would provide greater, I would see another wave of protests if they abdicated their role to protect and serve. And it would further erode the public trust in law enforcement. I have to admit, I was born and raised in Chicago. I grew up there as a teenager in the 80s. The police force there had an awful reputation of brutality and racism. I was raised by an internationally recognized surgeon and a mother who worked for the mayor. So I had a great deal of privilege. It did not matter once I left my house because I was a Black kid and therefore suspect. And so I was raised, my parents had to tell me, don't run in public for fear that that mere action with the body I inhabited would cause me harm. And that was an awful soul-crushing thing for them to say that I would not understand until 40 years later, until I told my 2 Black teenage sons the same thing in Philadelphia. So these issues are all interrelated. And if my biggest concern is that public safety has been too narrowly defined historically. And I embrace the theory of community safety, where irrespective of what community you come from, you feel as safe as anyone else who comes from any other community. And unless and until policing does that, I'm going to be very nervous and very suspicious of the extent to which we can curtail the abuses and corruption and concerns with regard to law enforcement. And so that applies to how they respond to whatever happens with a federal occupation, because that's exactly what it is.
Representative, this is Oscar speaking. I just wanted to hear about, we're seeing a lot of reports from other states and at the federal level about people being concerned with access to polling places, mail-in voting, all that. What are we doing at the state level to protect people's right to vote in Philadelphia and across the state?
Great question, something I was hoping someone would ask me about, really important. We're not doing nearly enough. And one of the reasons is on the local level, our Board of Elections, our city commissioners do not have the money they need to run these elections in modern times. They're understaffed. They need a lot of help. Before the pandemic, Mayor Kenney slashed their budget by 20%. So when we talk about delays, when we talk about things falling through the cracks, when we talk about polling places that are understaffed and where those staff are undertrained, that all goes back, it mostly goes back to money. It also goes to leadership, but it goes back to money. What do we prioritize? If it's not our participatory democracy, I don't know what to say. I mean, that's the Board of Elections. And as a city, that's something we have to embrace. We also have to be concerned at the delegitimization of the electoral process in the upcoming election in Philadelphia. Why? Because irrespective of your political views on this call or your party affiliation, if there's any concern that Philadelphia did not uphold election integrity, and Philadelphia is the only city of the first class It's the only large city. It's 1.6 million strong. The next biggest city is Pittsburgh, which has a little over 300,000. So there's nothing that comes close to the size of the electorate in Philadelphia. And Pennsylvania is one of those battleground states. So whether you, regardless of who you seek to support in November, Pennsylvania is going to be the tip of the spear, and the tippity tip of that spear is going to be Philadelphia. And so if there's any perception, not just reality, but perception of impropriety or corruption or incompetence by the Board of Elections in November, it can cause a destabilizing a set of events that may delay who our electors certify and who wins Pennsylvania, and therefore who potentially, wins the presidency. And we need to have that information by December 14th. And if there are delays, and there are all kinds of lawsuits, kind of like Gore versus Gore versus Bush in 2000, that has an international impact. And that could be a crisis that hurts markets, that hurt everything. So it's really important. So there is some bipartisan movement to begin counting, processing ballots before Election Day. So what that means is just over half of the people who voted in the last election in June 2nd, in the primary, voted via mail. They voted with a paper ballot and they sent it in. And it was an avalanche of ballots that a skeletal staff had to process. Now, the actual counting of the ballots is automated. It's through a machine that processes up to 70,000 ballots within a day. That's a lot of ballots. So that's not being done by hand. You don't have to worry about someone kind of cheating the system. That's all kind of optical scan, very accurate and very quick. But opening up the ballot, because there's 2 envelopes, that takes time. That involves manual labor. And that caused a great delay, among other things, not to mention the pandemic. And there was a curfew, and there was civil unrest, and new voting machines, right? All of those things conspired to slow down the process. We have a number of things that are working in our favor. When I say our favor, I mean our participatory democracy in the electoral process. One is there were 14 lawsuits in the last primary season, which delayed finalizing the names on the ballot. Our new law says that we can vote up to 50 days before Election Day, but if the ballot isn't ready, then we can't vote. I'm told by the Board of Elections that the actual finalized ballot will be ready in a matter of weeks. So that means that we could have potentially 50 days to vote for everybody who wants to vote at home and either mail in or drop off their ballot. So that's really important, and that's a good thing. We can have more drop boxes. Drop boxes look like mailboxes, but they're the property of the Board of Elections, where you show your ID and then you drop that ballot into the drop box, and it is surveilled 24/7 by a camera. And there will be someone staffing it to make sure that you are who you say you are. And you can also drop it off, I think probably at more locations as well, leading up to Election Day. So these are all positive advances that they were not able to implement in June, because originally the primary was supposed to be April 28th, but because of the coronavirus, they pushed it back to June 2nd, even though they really needed more time. But the governor and the legislature did not want to provide more time than June 2nd. So all of those things are good. I think there may be a legislative fix to allowing for the processing of ballots before Election Day versus starting at 7 a.m. on Election Day. That would rapidly, that would reduce the lag time. So that's good. We have to make sure that the process is safe and secure so that people are not sharing information with campaigns or media or politicians or whomever. So we need to protect that process. You also can actually tabulate the ballots without reporting the final numbers. So you could actually have those ballots go through the machine and then hold off on sharing that information. So not even the people who are operating the machine will know what the results are. I don't know if that's something that will be approved on a bipartisan level, because there's a lot of concern and suspicion around what happens if, you know, a board of elections staffer, you know, gets access to those results and leaks it to a reporter or to a campaign or to some other special interest group. That would be awful. So we're looking into those things, but we don't have a whole lot of time, because I believe 50 days before November 3rd, I can't do the math in my head, but it's early September. And we're not supposed to be back in session till mid-September. So we'd have to come back before then. So that's kind of where we are. But if nothing else happens, just those things I mentioned about getting our ballots, getting the ballot completed early. We can already apply for mail-in ballots right now online, and they will just send it as soon as they're ready. So we have more opportunities to do this right than in June. And I guess the last piece is for all those people who don't know about mail-in voting or who do not have access to technology, because you need an email address and internet access and a state-issued ID to request a ballot online. For all those people who are going to show up in person, I'm concerned about their health and public health generally, including the poll workers, many of whom are elderly and have the most comorbidities. So there's this balance, there's this tension between not letting people wait in line for 5 hours by having more polling places available, or discouraging anybody coming and having as few polling places as possible. So the real work, and this is work that should be on a nonpartisan level, is we need to get as many people to vote at home as possible, because it is indeed safer and more secure than these new fancy machines. These new fancy machines can be hacked, even though they're not connected to the internet. You can put malware on each individual machine, and we would not be able to determine until it's too late to determine if something's wrong. And these machines have not had a particularly good track record in the 2 election cycles they've been used. So that's another reason I strongly embrace paper ballots via voting at home.
Are there other questions? While you're thinking, it looks like we have a few additional guests. Arlene Brackett, welcome. She may have to unmute herself, but welcome. And I think we have someone else on an iPhone. Is that Inspector Pace?
That's correct. Hi. Sorry, I was a little late.
All right, we're looking at your ceiling though.
Sorry, I'm over here trying to do a double duty here. So
that's okay. We understand.
Hello.
There you go. Now we recognize you. I'm glad you're able to join us, and I know you're going to be talking in a couple of weeks or so in August with us.
Look forward to it.
Yeah, great. Welcome. And hi, Arlene. Are there other questions for Rep. Rabb, now that I know him? And I know I have one too, but I want to see if anyone else has a question.
Just one about the DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, that is critical to protecting the environmental welfare of every resident in the Commonwealth. We had just had a 2-year grand jury report stating that the DEP staff has been very cozy with the fracking industry, and they have been less than diligent about inspecting and surveilling the fracking industry for the last several years, which has enabled the fracking industry to continue polluting both the water supply and air supply in our Commonwealth. And that the latest news is that there's no appetite in the Pennsylvania legislature, especially among the majority party, to change that in any way, which is disappointing news, given the impact of the fracking industry on the Commonwealth and the fact that the Pennsylvania legislature has refused to levy any user fees, unlike every other state where the industry occurs. So we've lost billions of dollars in user fees from that industry. So the question in summary to Representative Rabb is, do you think that the grand jury report about the, in effect, malfeasance of the DEP staff in relation to the fracking industry will be addressed by the legislature in any form when they return in the fall?
Thank you so much for that question. You guys have some great questions. You're hitting everything I would have recommended we talk about if you had not raised them. The answer, sadly, is 0%. Zero. And again, I'm speaking from a nonpartisan perspective here. It is not just the majority party. It is those members who are more influenced by special interests. There are more lobbyists who represent oil and gas in this state than there are members of the Pennsylvania General Assembly. And why is that important? Because we have the largest full-time legislature in the country. There are more people who are influencing members like me than you can shake a stick at. And so to me, it's structural. And a lot of it has to do with campaign finance reform. Any of you folks on this call who would love to burn money could write me $1 million check. You couldn't write your congressperson or your senator $1 million check, but you could write your state rep or any state rep or state senator $1 million check, $1 billion check. There are no campaign contribution caps in this state. And it shows. It shows. And no one should have that much power. Your power should be based on how compelling your argument is and not how deep your pockets are. And I know that sounds naive, but if you look at my campaign finance reports, I am consistent. If you want to know who influences me the most, I'll tell you right now, my mommy. It's really important that we have the level of transparency and accountability amongst our elected officials. If there was campaign finance reform, the votes would look a lot different. And here's the other thing. So I am very opposed. I am unapologetically opposed to fracking. I visited the rural communities that have been decimated by fracking. I've spoken to people, veterans who served their country honorably, who have cancer because of the fracking industry, who have signed gag orders, who are not allowed to express themselves using their First Amendment rights that you and I have. They are not allowed to speak about these issues because years ago, they were sold a bill of goods. They leased their land to an industry that cares nothing about them or the environment in those areas or anywhere. And I believe that irrespective of what this legislature does or doesn't do, fracking will be its own demise, and not not for environmental reasons, but for financial reasons. I believe Wall Street is going to grow tired of fracking and see that it is because more and more people are demanding environmentally sustainable energy sources, and that wind and solar are going to be more affordable and create more jobs. And these jobs are going to be high-paying jobs and local jobs. Many of the jobs in fracking are either temporary or employing people who don't actually live in Pennsylvania. And that's a problem. So I believe that irrespective of the composition of the legislature, that because of public outcry of folks who care about our environment, which by the way, is protected in our state constitution. We in Montana are the only states that have environmental stewardship baked into our state constitution. An amendment to our constitution around 50 years ago that was unanimously and bipartisanly supported. So I think that's a really, really strong point of pride for us. And we have to honor that. And that includes how we address this industry that, while I believe will wane, right now it's causing great harm to people, wildlife, the environment. And I hope that there'll be more members, irrespective of campaign finance reform. We'll do the right thing, but there are not enough members who are educated enough about how disastrous fracking is, both environmentally and economically. And if the people who they hear from the most are the lobbyists who are in Harrisburg, more so than their constituents, their donors, corporate media, other advocates, then fracking will remain king. And we are the second largest producer of fracked gas. And if you agree with my politics on this, you will call it fracked gas and not natural gas, because there's nothing natural about it. If you need 200 chemicals to be thrust thousands of feet into the ground to extract it, that doesn't really sound natural to me. So I believe that we will have progress irrespective of the composition of the legislature, but I would like more of my colleagues to be on the right side of history and on the right side of our environment and our communities that are being besieged well far outside of Philadelphia. But it also connects to Philadelphia because we have a refinery that blew up. And if one piece of shrapnel, one piece, landed in the wrong place, they said 500,000 people could have been eviscerated, could have literally melted from the inside out. And we are complicit in that as Philadelphians. We can't say, oh, those rural folks, they just want any job they can, you know, beyond Walmart or prisons. So, you know, that's them. No, we're complicit because those pipelines come through Philadelphia. One of the biggest refineries in the East Coast is in Philadelphia. So we are all responsible for our environmental and energy policies. And the last thing I want to say is, I'm not an optimist. I'm mildly allergic to optimism, but I surround myself with people who have different perspectives. And if you look at the progression of technology, you look at the progression of public opinion around these issues, it's moving in the right direction. I just hope there's more of us in elective office who listen to the majority of the people who are wanting more environmentally sound energy sources, and who want to have an industry that actually creates good family sustaining jobs and not at the expense of the environment. And I think we can do that. I know we can do that. And so that's what I'm committed to. So I believe there is hope, despite the depressing facts and figures I gave you leading up to this.
All right. We have time for maybe one really short question if anyone did not have a chance to or want to ask a follow-up question.
And I'll try to be short myself, which is
it's okay.
Not my strength. But
no, I want to be respectful of everyone's time.
Sure.
What is the legislature's opinion on living minimum wage in the state?
Great question. So I believe, and if I haven't stated earlier, if you haven't figured out, I'm a Democrat. Most Democrats are supportive of a minimum wage that moves towards a living wage. Most Republicans oppose a minimum wage that moves towards a living wage. And the key word here is most. So most Democrats would support it, and some Republicans would support it, which means that if a bill actually came to the House floor, I think it would be passed. But because of procedural tricks in Harrisburg, all those controversial bills will never see the light of day if they're afraid that those bills might pass. The same goes to extending protected protections for LGBTQ Pennsylvanians. In this state, if you're gay, you're a second-class citizen by law. You can be fired openly because of your sexual orientation, even though federally you can marry someone of the same gender. So it's a sad irony. So the majority of my colleagues would support that bill, but leadership in the majority party refuses to run those bills because they don't want those bills to become law. And that's sad. So part of the reason I love doing these calls is because some of the things I'm talking about now, you're not going to get in sound bites on watching local news or in the newspaper. And so I like to talk about the things kind of behind the scenes and procedural things. So you have the nuance, understand the nuances and complexities of how these things actually happen. But back to the minimum wage, I actually am the co-sponsor of the One Fair Wage bill. which is the bill that the governor's been pushing that would move us to $15 over the next 5 years. It would also abolish the tipped minimum wage, which in Pennsylvania, if you don't know this, folks, listen carefully. It's $2.83 in 2020. So if you're a server, that's how much you get baseline, and then anything else you get is with tips. And the origin of the tipped minimum wage comes from slavery. After the Emancipation Proclamation, and more specifically the 13th Amendment, white employers in the South did not believe morally or philosophically paying Black people for their labor. So they said, okay, white people, if you want to pay them, you're going to have to do it out of your own pocket. You're going to have to tip them. So that's why, if you've noticed, for those of you who've traveled to Europe and other places where you don't find tips, like people don't tip, it's because of our connection to American slavery. And so that racist origin hurts everybody, not just Black people. It hurts everybody who's earning a poverty wage in the richest country in world history, $2.83. So it would abolish the tipped minimum wage, move us to $15 over 5 years. And that was a negotiated bill that Republicans didn't want to run. If Democrats take back the majority in November, I may introduce a bill that's even more bold, because frankly, $15 is not a living wage in Philadelphia, far from it. And
in 5 years.
And certainly not 5 years. Even today, it's not even close. So we need to have conversations about, do we believe as Philadelphians that someone who works 40 hours a week, has a kid, who just wants a one-bedroom apartment, one bedroom, deserves to live with dignity without being impoverished? And it's a simple question, yes or no. And, you know, choose your side and decide what side of history you want to be on. But that number is going to be a lot higher than 15. And it should. And there's ways of making it happen, but we have to use our collective creativity to make it work. Otherwise, we're putting our heads in the sand, and we're paying for all those social services and public assistance for all of those people who are hired largely by corporations who aren't actually paying their state taxes. So all the corporations that hire the highest number of people with the poverty wage have loopholes that they take advantage of by setting up shop in Delaware. They operate in Pennsylvania, and then they are depriving all of us of that taxpayer money to go to all the things that we care about beyond just poor working parents, but everything: environment, elections, housing, education, all of those things. So I just believe in paying your fair share.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Rep. Rabb, for speaking with us today, and we'll have to have you come back again. We could go on for hours. So
I know I'm loquacious.
No.
I'm just very passionate, and I really appreciate that you took the time to invite me, because I take my job very seriously. And anytime you invite me, I will come back, and I will try to be more concise.
Well, no. Thank you so much. And as a small token of our thank you to you, Rotary International has really taken up the cause in the past 25 or so years to eradicate polio around the world. So one of the things we do with our speakers, we will send you a certificate that we are inoculating 6 children from receiving polio in the world. It's still in 2 countries. We're trying to eradicate it completely, but we'll do this in your honor. We'll send you something in the mail to certify this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored.
Thank you. So to finish up the meeting, a couple things. One is we have a few members that joined us today that we weren't able to honor them a few weeks ago in terms of birthdays and anniversaries. First of all, birthdays. Dan King, you had a birthday earlier in the month. Yep. Welcome back. I know you're feeling better now, so we're so glad to see you again. And members anniversary, Karen Masato, 1 year with our club. I don't have how long other clubs, but I do. It's a year with us. So thank you. Great. The final thing is upcoming meetings and happy hour. So just hit the meetings first. Next week we have one of our own, Dr. Braylow. She's going to talk about COVID-19, give us an update on what she's seeing in her practice now. I know she's back full time. The following week, August 6th, we have an interesting guest, Stephen Smith. He is a criminologist, and he's going to talk about his research in that area, followed by also one of our own, Inspector Pace is going to give us an update on what's been going on in the Philadelphia police. And for those of you who don't know, he's also a Rotary Peace Fellow, and boy, we could use you more than ever in our world and in our community. So, so we have some great stuff lined up. So finally, with happy dollars, does anyone have any happy dollars? Okay.
I do. I want to just acknowledge that Keith has joined us, apparently, from St. Petersburg, I believe. Keith, do you want to just say hello? I don't know if you can unmute yourself, Keith.
Can you hear me?
Hello? Okay, we can't hear you well.
We hear you, but barely, Keith. Now you're on mute. You got to unmute yourself.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me now?
Hi, yes, and welcome.
Hi, thanks. Hold on, I can try to turn my camera on too, maybe.
Where are you in the world? In Florida, right?
Turn my camera on. There I am. St. Petersburg, Florida. I used to live in, well, Philadelphia and then West Conshohocken. So during the COVID, I just thought it might be nice to check out some other clubs a little bit.
Glad
Well,
to have. Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Join us again. Just email us.
Okay, yeah, unfortunately it got a little late, but
okay,
I'll try again in a couple weeks, I think.
Yep. All right, great. Welcome. Well, I have a couple happy dollars. My first one is for our speaker today. Great job speaking, and it was very informative. And my second happy dollar is to thank the club. I received Rotary glasses and also a certificate of appreciation from all of you. Thank you very much for, I guess, my service last year as club president. So I appreciate it. And this is just water in here. I want to make sure, you know, it's not beer or anything like that. Not at this time. So, but thank you. Are there any other happy dollars? All right. Well, if not, then there's nothing else for the good of the club. Again, last minute push. We have our fundraiser online, bingo. Buy a ticket for someone. It's only $25. And all of the money goes towards our food drive. So we have to get this registered by today because we have to have our final plans in place, and Oscar's got to send out emails and instruction to everyone. But we're around $1,000. Sign up, get your friends and relatives. It'll be fun. It'll be a good opportunity. And one of our former presidents is emceeing it too, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
Grandy, and he's very entertaining. Hey, there will also be prizes if that's an incentive. Tell your friends and family that we have gift cards, don't we, Oscar? Do you know what kind of gift cards we have?
Yeah, we have gift cards to businesses, things like CVS, Lowe's, and then we have a grand prize, which Dr. Cabot donated, which is a very fancy toothbrush kit. It's cool, but I can't do it justice.
Okay, so the point is it could be, participants could be anywhere in the world, right? We'll just mail them the prize, right?
Right.
They don't have to be Philadelphia city-based. Great.
Right. Right. Well, thank you all very much, and thank you guests for joining us, and have a great week. We'll see you next Thursday or Friday.